All right, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We're happy to have you with us. We actually are doing this session this evening because when we did our treasurer training, people felt like this would be a good opportunity to connect, get some questions answered. So it's going to be super informal. There's no presentation of any kind. We are just here to answer questions, to kind of meet you where you're at and try and be as helpful as we can. So with that, I know that there are people kind of coming in, but if anybody would like to start us off, have any questions that we can get to. I know that you all must be, just finalizing your financial reviews and handing those in, getting ready to finalize your budget for the new year, thinking through some fundraising and budgeting ideas. So we are here for all of it. So please, feel free to just kind of unmute yourself, raise your hand, and, let's get started. Don't all ask at once. Whew, the deluge is crazy. Does anybody have any questions?
My name is Dolphia Ridley, and I'm the treasurer at Cameron Elementary School. And
hey, welcome.
Hello. And I'm trying to multitask. I had to take down hair to get it done. But this is my first year. And I just didn't know whether there's some tips. I mean, I've met with the former treasurer. I'm getting all the materials from her, all of the records. But if there are any pitfalls that I need to avoid as a new treasurer?
Ooh, that's a loaded question.
Good question, Grandma.
Thank you.
See, you got a cheering section and everything. All right. I think that, one of the things, so this is my third year as the county treasurer. And one of the things that I did initially was just kind of carry forward everything that was happening. The record keeping system and everything. So the best thing that I can say is kind of get into your groove and then figure out the system that works best for you. And don't be afraid to kind of question why somebody did something a particular way and, go forward with how you want to do things. I would say make sure that everything that you're doing is according to bylaws and standing rules. Use the county and the state PTA as resources. And I would really just make sure that your expenditures match your budget and that, you're keeping good records, good receipts, things like that. I think as a treasurer, if you do that, you're going to be in really good shape.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Absolutely.
I'm just going to add on to that and say, Jamie is your resource. So as you're going through and if you have questions about your treasurer job, whether it's filling out something or somebody asks you to do something and you're not sure if you're supposed to do that, you can reach out directly to Jamie. Part of her job as the county treasurer is to be a resource for all of the treasurers at the local units. So no question is too big or too small. Please come to the council because we are here for you.
Yep.
Thank you very much. Is there, I don't know how, I'm a grandma, so I'm still kind of challenged by technology. So if I have a question, what's the process? Is there like a website? Is there
Nope, you just send me an email, shoot me a phone call. My phone number and my email are on the county website, but I'll also put it in the chat box so everybody has it.
Thank you.
Sure. All right, anything else?
Jamie, how do we go about writing a budget, especially if we're a new treasurer?
That is a good question. So usually what I like to do is I look at last year and I kind of say, okay, what was the budgeted amount last year versus the actual amount? I will caution everybody this year, it just seems like everything is more expensive. So kind of figure in 3%. That's about what we're seeing increase right now. And then what I would do is take whatever calendar of events that you have decided on as a PTA and decide where your costs versus your intake will be, right? How many fundraisers do you have? Will that cover all of your programming? Do you have to do additional fundraisers to make sure you're covering things like that? Always remember that your budget should be looked at on a monthly basis, because let's say, for instance, you as a school are going to do Boosterthon, which we know is super popular. And you think, okay, our revenue from that is going to be $10,000. And so we've based all of these programs that we want to do on that $10,000. But what if you make less? Then you have to go in and revise that budget. So as treasurers, that's something we should be looking at every month, right? So kind of, what was your budgeted amount? What was your actual for last year? Did you account for more things being virtual because of COVID than you planned for this year? And then just kind of start making those adjustments, right? And also don't forget, you've got to have an administrative line for your insurance. If anybody uses PO boxes, let's see, financial systems would be included in that, all of those kinds of things. And then once you do that, you have it approved by the membership. And always remember, if there's, about a $300 change in any of those line items, you have to get that re-voted on. So that's kind of how I do it. I also generally like to involve my board. So as treasurers, if you're taking a look at things, you draft it, you can host a meeting and say, hey guys, what do you think about this? You could do it via email. You could do it at a meeting, whatever you're comfortable with, but definitely getting your other board members involved, just in case they have plans for programs that maybe you aren't aware of and things like that.
So once your board approves your budget, are you done?
No. So once the board approves the budget, so you'll present the budget to the board will approve it. Once that happens, your general membership has to approve it as well. And then you will do amendments anytime there's a plus or minus $300 in a line item. You'll have to get it re-voted on by your general membership. So your budget should be a living document that you review and revise as needed. But you have to have general membership vote on it before you really can kind of start spending against it.
So for those of you that joined late, this is a very informal, just Q&A session. If you guys have specific questions, please unmute yourself and just start talking. Right now, I'm just asking questions to Jamie that we hear a lot. So, but I'm only doing that because nobody's talking. So if you have a question, please unmute yourself. In the meantime, Jamie, when you create your budget, do you do your fundraisers first?
You mean account for them or do them and then do the budget?
Yeah, like I want to raise $20,000. So I'm going to do this fundraiser, and this fundraiser, but I don't know what I'm spending the money on yet, but I just want to make money.
Ooh, I mean, that's great in theory, right? But not quite in practice. So one tenet of the PTA or being a PTA is that for every fundraiser you do, there's a 3-to-1 rule. You have to do 3 programs. So think through, like, if I do this one fundraiser, what are my 3 programs that I want to do? You always want to draft your budget before the year starts, because the problem then will be is you can't spend anything until it's approved. So what you should do is kind of guesstimate. I want to do these 3 fundraisers. I, know that this one in the past has brought in X amount. And that's kind of where your adjustments come in, right? If you make more than, and we always hope that you make more than you guesstimate, then you can kind of say, okay, here are the additional things we want to do with that. Or, we were only going to spend $5 here. Now we want to spend $10 here, and you adjust your budget as you go through. But you should always kind of do your budget in the beginning. Get yourself a membership number, right? How many members do we want to have? And what are the dues for those members, right? That goes into your revenue. Any fundraisers that you want to do, guesstimate what you may make, and then kind of work down from there. The notion here is that first, all parents generally want to know what you're fundraising for. So if you're like, hey, I'm just going to raise money, that may not give you the biggest bang for your buck. You may really want to have, as a PTA, what are our fundraising goals this year, right? Do we want to, the school needs X, we want to purchase X with the school. Or, we have a commitment to make, some Title I schools as PTAs, we say, look, we want to make sure that all the programming is free. So we're going to fundraise up front and then all the programs are free. So you'll just kind of have to decide what you're fundraising for. The other important thing, and we always get a question about carryover at the end of the year. And during COVID, there was not a whole lot PTAs could do about carryover because we couldn't spend a whole lot of money on things that, weren't happening. But the notion is that whatever you fundraise in a year, you generally spend in a year, with a small holdover for any of those summertime or beginning of the year things that you may do. So, if you're in elementary school and you do kinder play dates, right? So make sure you're holding back money for whatever that is. If you do a beginning of the year breakfast for your teachers, make sure you withhold whatever that is. But everything else should really be spent within the year, because what you want to do is say, hey, parents who helped us fundraise, we're spending this money on your students. And what we know is that Fairfax County is fairly transient, right? People move schools, they move counties, they move everything. And so we want to make sure that the parents are fundraising in that year, get the benefit of whatever those things are in that year.
Yeah, one of the things that I like to do when we're creating our budgets is decide what I want to spend money on first and how much money that is. So if I want to focus on physical fitness and I'm going to start a running club and I'm going to pay for everybody to do a 5K, I'm like, oh, I need $1,000 to do this, and I think about all the things that I want to spend money on. And then I'm like, oh, at the end of the day, I need $10,000. How can I get the $10,000? So I like to, a lot of PTAs go to the fundraisers first, but they don't know why they're spending money. So we always kind of say, think about what it is you actually want to spend money on, and then come back and figure out how you're going to get the money.
Yeah, because you also don't want to kind of tax your community too much, and kind of perpetually fundraise, right? It's like, what is our goal? And then generally, I know at our local PTA, we put that out at the general meeting, like, here's our fundraising goal for the year. Here are the things that we need to do. We all understand that things come up that you wouldn't necessarily think about or need at the beginning of the year. So there's always some wiggle room in that. But having a plan up front is always super helpful, because then parents understand what it is that you're trying to do. I don't know if it was last year or the year before, our local PTA did a strategic plan, right? And it said, okay, look, over the course of the next 3 years, here are the things that we want to do as a PTA, and here's what's important to us. And some of that included better communication with our families, making sure that we were covering PTA items in different languages, the languages that were at our school. And so those are all the kinds of different programming pieces that you could consider and then fundraise towards. So sometimes it helps to start with that as well.
What kinds of things should PTAs be paying for or not paying for?
So as a general rule, PTAs should not fund anything that it is the responsibility of the Fairfax County Public Schools to provide. So I know a hot topic during COVID was air filters. And a lot of families were like, we don't understand why we can't just buy air filters and donate them to the school. And so we need to make sure that what we're doing is equitable, right? And equal across schools and even across classrooms within the same school sometimes. And we have to make sure that what we're spending money on is not something that the school system is supposed to pay for. The other thing that I will also caution everybody about is when they're doing big gives to the school, to make sure that it fits within your insurance liability. I know a lot of PTAs like to do playground activity materials. And so just make sure that, if anything were to happen, that that's covered under your insurance, or that you've had a facilities assessment at the school done and that the facilities and groundskeepers understand what you're trying to do and work with them and things like that. I also can tell you from my own experience at our PTA, working with FCPS facilities and grounds folks really kind of help you see like where their kind of line is and what they do and what they don't do, so that you have a better understanding of a PTA when somebody comes in and asks you for something, where that line is. But the general rule is that if the school is supposed to provide it, the PTA probably should not. Sorry, there's a lot of background noise in this place. We have puppies, we have, it's crazy here. Any other questions? Any things that you're curious about, things that have come up, things that you just kind of are like, hey, how might I deal with this if it comes up? I think one of the hardest things for PTAs to do is say no when somebody asks us to do something, because our general nature is to help our school, right? That's kind of what we're there for. But there are times that we have to say no, and that's always super hard as well.
Hey.
Hey.
I'm Tiffany Barrows. I'm the Sangster Treasurer. So I'm the first year.
I'm Tiffany Barrows. I'm the Sangster Treasurer.
Hold on one second. There you go.
Okay. So thank you for doing this. This is super helpful. And yeah, I didn't have many questions, but listening to you guys talk through these scenarios is really great. So I appreciate it. We did have one question though. The organizational structure form, does that replace the bylaws?
So it doesn't replace the bylaws, and Kara can help me walk through that.
I'm going to say kind of.
Okay.
So last year, Virginia PTA created what's called uniform bylaws. So every local unit has the exact same bylaws. What the organizational structure form did is it took some of the stuff out of the bylaws. So the bylaws used to include how many positions you have, how many vice presidents do you have, how many meetings do you have a year. The bylaws used to include that. Now that's out of the bylaws, and that is on your organizational structure form. So the idea is your organizational structure form lists who your officers are, not their name, just the title, how many meetings you have, what your quorum is, stuff like that. And if that is consistent from year to year, you don't need to update it. And what this does is it removes the 5 year. We used to have to adjust our bylaws every 5 years, regardless. And this removes that and just gives you like a 1 page that you have to fill out. So if your PTA did it last year and it has not changed this year, you do not need to resubmit it.
Okay, that is super helpful. So everybody has the same bylaws. It's just we update the organizational structure if needed.
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
This brings to mind for me, Kara, 2 other things that I think folks may want to know about since we're being chatty today. The first is that every PTA should have some standing rules, right? And that is a separate document from your bylaws and can be very PTA specific. I especially encourage those around financial matters, right? How long are you going to give people to hand in reimbursements? Is there a form that people have to, fill out? Like, what are your processes? What are your procedures? It is a rule that you have 2 signers on a check, but this year Virginia PTA, their financial review form allowed for a bank check, right? Which is you as a treasurer send a check directly from your bank. So is your PTA going to allow that? So you should definitely be thinking through standing rules. They're a year-to-year document. And I always encourage those for PTAs, especially in the financial space. So that's the first thing. The second thing is about compliance, right? And so, your pieces of compliance are all your officers updated in Member Hub? Have you filed your taxes? Did you complete your 990? Is your insurance up to date and uploaded in Member Hub? Those are your portions of compliance. If something has changed, is your bylaw form, that standardized form, uploaded in Member Hub, and does VA PTA have it? Now, it's important that you maintain compliance, because if you don't do your compliance for 3 years, you lose your 501c3 status as a PTA under the umbrella of the Virginia Congress of Parents. On a smaller scale, it's important because if you are not in compliance as a PTA, your students cannot participate in PTA type programming like grants, and scholarships. If you have high school students, we have a scholarship program. They can't participate in Reflections, which is our art program. So all the programs that are generally local PTA up through national PTA, your students, if you're not in compliance, can't participate in those. And that's a real shame. I don't mind sharing that I came from a PTA who was out of compliance, and we haven't done Reflections in years. And finally this year we're going to do Reflections, and everybody is like, what's that? You know, and so we're kind of starting from the ground up. And so kind of when you fall out of compliance, those are the things that your students and your community loses out on. So compliance, super important. As treasurers, this is kind of in our bailiwick, right? It's super easy for us to do. You get all your forms, you upload them into Member Hub. Insurance is in our purview because we pay for it. 990s are in our purview because we file the taxes. We have to sign off on that final financial review along with the president. So that's in our bailiwick. And all you have to do is upload it into Member Hub, log in, go to the compliance tab, and you'll be ready to go. The other big thing is please make sure that your officers are in Member Hub. That is the best way for us to be able to contact you guys. So that is another big thing that we ask everybody to do. So while we were talking about the standardized form, that brought up.
So I wanted to add to the standing rules to give you guys a real life example of how standing rules can also eliminate conflict before it happens. So real life example, the FCC PTA standing rules say that if FCC PTA pays for registration for somebody to go to something, you have to go. You have to go. I was registered for National PTA, and I had an emergency the week, like 2 days before it. FCC PTA had already paid for it, and I couldn't go, and I couldn't get anybody to replace me. The standing rules said I had to go. So I didn't even talk to Jamie. I was like, Jamie, how do I give you money? But you could see how something like that could turn into a conflict where somebody was like, well, I don't go, I don't want to pay, you know? And so I wanted to share that real life example that Jamie and I didn't even need to have a conversation because we had standing rules. The conversation was, how do you want me to pay FCC PTA back? So just wanted to throw that out there. And Jamie, while you're talking, I'm going to pull up a slide that Jenna White sent us, and I'm going to share my screen.
All right. And I would also say, so Jenna is our VP of Communications. She did an amazing job putting together a new website for us. All of this information, there's a treasurer page on there now. Most of this information is there. How you can pay dues is there. And some sample standing rules are also there, if I am correct. And, you know, like borrow them, steal them. We're okay, right? Like we're fine with that. Just cut and paste them. You'll be fine.
Sorry, it's taking me a moment. I'm going to share my screen and you guys are going to see what a hot mess I am because I have like 8,000 tabs open all the time. Right, and slideshow. So communications is only effective if we are able to actually communicate with you. So in thinking of that, we have our Get Engaged checklist, and I'm going to send this to you guys afterwards. But every month on the 5th or around the 5th, FCC PTA will send an update with anything and everything we can think of. And we try to like do 2 to 3 sentences at a time. And then you click a link if you want to read more. But there's all kinds of information in there. And it's what's going on in our community, and it's events to get involved and to get training. So you want to make sure that you are receiving that and that you are reading it. Make sure that everybody on your team is receiving them too. If you're in Member Hub, we should be getting it. However, there are some bad emails in Member Hub. So make sure that your emails are updated. And if you're having a hard time making sure you get them, you can email Jenna at VP Communications. We also have a Facebook group for local leaders. This is specific to Fairfax County. So it's an opportunity for you guys to share the work that you're doing or ask questions and crowdsource your answers. And then we also have Twitter and Instagram. And then she has something on pass on to members. So members can also sign up for emails if they want to, because it's not just PTA specific. Sometimes it's what's going on in the county. And we know that Facebook's algorithms, the more that people engage with your page, the more likely they are to see your page. So we would love some likes or comments on content that we are sharing. So these are hyperlinks. So when I send you this, I'll probably send it to you tomorrow. You'll be able to just click directly to find the Facebook group and things like that. All right, I'm going to stop sharing.
And I will also say this is a great space. So I know treasurers sometimes we're like, hey, we're all about the money. You guys do the rest. But it's a really good place for us to kind of see what other people are up to. You know, you can ask your questions there just as easily. It's super important that you guys are engaged in the newsletter because I will send information. You'll get emails from me as well saying, hey, it's time to pay your dues, or hey, don't forget this compliance document is due. And so like, that's a really good place for treasurers to get information. There's a lot of questions there about, hey, have you guys done this or that, or is this allowable? Both myself and the treasurer of Virginia PTA belong to that page. We pipe in, we answer questions. So that's a good space to do it. If like you're on Facebook and you're like, hey, I just need a quick question answered, you know, tag us, we'll answer you. Things, you know, don't come up a ton for treasurers, but I find that when they do, it's usually, you know, at the point where, you know, you need your question answered then, right? Like not 12 days from now, but then. So we all really try and do like a 24 to 48 hour, you know, turnaround on emails. I, for one, will tell you that I am seeing a lot more emails than I did even the last year. So feel free if I miss something or if I don't get back to you to send it to me again and say, hey, did you get this? Because you didn't answer me. I'm totally okay with that, right? Because we all kind of need that prodding a bit, and we understand that, you know, we are your resource and we're here to answer questions for you.
Jamie, what should treasurers present at the very first general membership meeting, which is coming up?
Yes. So your first meeting, like the first meeting is kind of all about you, right? So you want to make sure that you're presenting your financial review. Either you can do it or the head of your financial review committee can do it, if that isn't you. Usually our new treasurers are part of the financial review committee. That's a pretty good practice because they get a good handle on kind of what happened the last year. So you'll want to present that and have a vote on it. Make sure your president knows you need to be on the agenda. And the other thing that you'll present and vote on is your budget. And remember, it's super important to get that budget voted on that first meeting so that you guys can continue to spend money. Because technically, unless you had what some of us call like a summer holdover line item or a summer budget that was voted on by general membership, between the end of your fiscal year and voting on your new budget, you shouldn't be doing any spending. And so it's super important that you get that budget voted on so you can kind of continue the business of the PTA. So that should really be what you're doing at that first meeting. A lot of us send stuff out via email beforehand. This way people can review it and bring their questions, and it's not this long protracted, you know, time of a meeting. So if anybody can do that, I would highly suggest it. If you have a membership list from last year or you've already had current members sign up by the time you have your first meeting, you know, make sure that you're sending that out so people get a chance to look at it. It's super hard for people, I think, to digest things when you're kind of giving it to them like 3 minutes before you're asking them to vote on it. So worst case scenario, you give it to them at the front end of the general meeting, and then maybe you vote like halfway through on the agenda, or maybe the treasurer is the last thing on the agenda, so they have some time to digest it. But that's kind of all of what you're doing at that first meeting.
What information should be included on a regular treasurer's report?
Perfect. So any spending or revenue for the month. So I know a lot of folks say, but you know, we have our, you know, our monthly meeting, you know, the second week, and by the second week of the month, you know, whatever I'm reporting from the last month is stale. It's not, it's okay. I like to do mine from the 1st of the month to the 30th of the month, because that's the bank statement. And that makes it really easy. And don't forget, if your membership is like, you know what, this doesn't make sense to me, I want to see the bank statement, you need to produce it for them. So any, intake of funds, any output of funds needs to be on that treasurer's report. If you're using a financial management system like MoneyMinder or QuickBooks, even Excel, you can kind of get the formulas in there, we'll spit out some kind of a monthly report for you. And you'll always want to make sure that you're watching and be able to produce your budgeted versus actuals. This way, and this is especially important if you're having an executive board meeting, because if there are differences between those, your budgeted amount and your actuals, you're going to want to be able to say, hey, we need to vote on this budget again at the next general meeting so we can continue our business. And so that's why it's super important that every month the treasurer looks at those items. What did we spend? What kind of revenue did we have? Did the expenditures match what was budgeted? And if, we see and we can forecast that the budgeted amount is either not enough or too much, we need to kind of take another look at that budget and, get people to vote on it again. And if you're asking them to vote on it again because you went over on a line item, you need to be able to tell them where in the budget it's coming from. So we had to reduce X to make sure we could pay for Y, right? You've got to be able to kind of describe that process to them and how you're thinking of that. Or, hey, we budgeted $100 here, we only spent 50. We want to put this other 50 to this other program. So be able to kind of talk them through where it's going. Because the thing that, treasurers are very good at is kind of knowing their own business, right? They know where the money came from. They know where they can put it. They know why it came through there. But if you just hand your membership a spreadsheet, they may not be able to follow that in the same way. And so being able to talk them through it when you give your treasurer report is super important.
Yeah, I would just add to that it's important to remember that this is the membership's money. It's not your money. It's not the president's money. And you and the president can't just make decisions that affect the budget without talking to your members. And I think it's really important to be transparent. I know when I was a treasurer, I used MoneyMinder, and I would print the monthly expenditure report. I would print the actuals to regular for budget. I had copies of all the checks that had been written. And I had a couple of parents who really wanted to dig through those records. And you can't be offended. Like if you need to be able to present everything at the meeting, like, here are my books, like, go through them, because it's not my money. So just remember that, because it can get frustrating because, like, that the books are right and you don't want to answer a million questions. But the people that are asking this, like, aren't out to get you. Like, it's just, so just remember it's not your money. You don't get to make the decisions, and be transparent with everything.
That brings up another good point, Kara. One thing that I think that our local PTAs struggle with, especially kind of on this side of COVID, right, are, it's hard enough to get a board, right? Much less like a full board with all the people you want. We are much more now seeing boards that have, your 3 required positions, your treasurer, your secretary, and your president. Every once in a while, we'll see a PTA that has a full board, and that's amazing. And we wish we could duplicate that everywhere. But the thing is that you absolutely, it is required, have somebody to reconcile those accounts. And that reconciliation is done every month by a person who's not a signer on the account, but who is an executive board member. So we realize that that is super hard for your very small PTAs who have only a few kind of executive board members. So try and figure out, is there somebody from your executive board? Is there a chair? Is there somebody who could serve in that function? Because that also gives a lot of credibility to you as a treasurer when you're saying, hey, here are my books, and this was reconciled by a party outside of the signatories on this account. Not only is it required by Virginia PTA, oftentimes it is required as a component of your insurance coverage. And then it's just good practice for you, right? It's basically saying, hey, there's a checks and balances on me, and here it is, and this person has signed off and they reconcile the accounts for me. If you are using, I am a big fan of, and I use MoneyMinder for the county. You can assign somebody that role specifically. They can log in and do it. You don't even have to do anything other than send them the bank statement. So I love that feature. At my local PTA, we use Excel. We don't use a financial system. And so basically the treasurer gives the secretary the bank statement and the credits and debits for the month, and she reconciles them, and she physically signs off. And so it's a little bit more arduous, but there are ways to do it if you're not using an electronic finance system. But that role is super important to have.
Can PTAs have a debit card?
They can. They cannot have credit cards, but they can have debit cards that are tied to their bank account. If you have a debit card, this is the one space where I feel like everything can go high and right super fast. So if you have a debit card, it's allowable. However, I am going to tell you, based on personal experience, I highly suggest that you have a set of standing rules just about that, right? About how that's going to work, right? So for instance, in Fairfax County, right, we have a debit card, right? There's a lot of things we have to do. If there is a recurring charge that we have to have, that goes month to month, one of ours is our communications tool. So at the beginning of the year, there's a form that we fill out, right? The president signs it, the treasurer signs it, and we know that this is going to be debited on this day of every month, whatever it is. The treasurer should save whatever that contract is, as well as the debit form that they have filled out with the president or whoever holds the debit card in your PTA. And then every time that invoice comes in, that becomes part of your record. If, there's just something that the debit card has to be used for, the way we worked it was, when Kara was president, she would email me or text me and say, hey, Jamie, we have to make this expenditure. Is it in the budget? Is it okay to put on the debit card? Right. And I would basically do what's called a certification of funding. I would say to her, yes, that's in the account. Yes, that's in according to the budget. Here's the form we fill out. So the request comes to me on the form, officially. I sign off on it. And then when the invoice comes in that it got paid, you attach that and that becomes part of your treasurer's notebook. So, it's got to be a series of checks and balances, there's got to be a person who says, hey, can I use it? There's got to be a person who says, yes, you can. There's got to be a form for your treasurer record that everybody signs off on. And then obviously at the end of the month, that then gets reconciled in the account. So really, yes, it's allowable, but a strong set of checks is absolutely what's necessary. And that, I encourage you guys to put some kind of SOPs in place about how that's going to be used and some policies and standing rules around it.
Does anyone have any questions for Jamie? It doesn't have to be compliance or treasurer related. If you have any PTA questions, we are here for you.
Yeah.
Well, I would say if there's no questions, we can go ahead. Oh, Stephanie's mic is off. Did you want to ask a question?
Yeah, hi. Sorry, I was multitasking a little bit and came in on the end of the conversation about monthly reconciliation. Would you mind kind of recapping that a little bit?
Sure.
Thanks.
So every month you have to reconcile your account. It's got to be somebody who's not a signer on the account. Generally, most PTAs use their secretary because it's somebody who understands everything that's going on and can easily kind of take a look at that. As long as it's not a signatory on the account, it can be any elected member. We have used appointed members when PTAs are short on staff or elected staff, but it can't just be like a general member per se. So you can go through, if you have a financial system, you can go through that system, whatever they have set up for reconciliation, or you could do, a paper and pen version where you send the person the bank statement, you send them the treasurer's report, they make sure that they match, and then they sign off, and that goes in as part of your record. So that is a requirement, and it's usually a requirement of your insurance as well.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. While we were talking about treasurer records, I would like to say the question that we get a lot is paper versus electronic. And what should you be keeping? There is no rule in Virginia PTA about whether you have to keep paper copies or electronic copies. What you do have to make sure of is whatever you have, paper or electronic, is accessible by your general membership. Either you can email it to them if they ask, or you can show it to them if they ask, but it has to be accessible by general membership if they were to ask for it. So that's the only tried and true rule. My first year as treasurer, I kept everything both electronically and on paper. Last year, we moved to mostly electronic, and by the end of the year, I just scanned everything else that I had to hand over to the financial review committee. This year, I started off almost everything's electronic this year. So it's really about kind of what works best for you and how you can be transparent in sharing those records when it's necessary. So if there's an electronic methodology and you can share it openly with whoever would like it, do it electronic. You also have to make sure that, I know for myself, I like digital records, I hate paper. So if you're kind of in your PTA's office somewhere and you're like, why do I have notebooks of paper from X number of years ago? Before you get rid of those, make sure that they're in line with the records retention policy of the PTA, right? Generally, financial records are held for 7 years. And make sure that, if you're tossing those, make sure that they're shredded, right? Because most papers have EIN numbers, they have bank account numbers, so make sure that you're doing your due diligence there as well.
Any other last minute questions? Not last minute, but any other final questions? I feel like I should sing like the Jeopardy theme song to give people time. Okay, I don't see anybody's mic coming off. So I think this is a good time for us to end the session. Saturday, I won't say tomorrow because tomorrow I'm taking my son to the water park. Saturday, I will send an email to everybody who registered with this recording and a couple of links that are helpful for treasurers. I will also send that slide that I showed you guys with how to make sure that we are communicating. That email will come from vptraining@fccpta.org. It may not have my name. It may have somebody else's name attached to it. It might say Hamid Manure. It might say Michelle Leet. Just open your emails and I will send that to you on Saturday. I'm going to go ahead and hit the stop recording button. And just remember, at any point, if you need help, we are here for you.
Thank you guys for coming, and we're just an email away.